Okay, so today we're jumping into the source material for a deep dive on Bhagat Singh. He's definitely one of the most recognized figures from India's independence struggle. But our sources, well, they paint a picture that goes way beyond just the basic biography of a national hero.
That's absolutely right. Our mission here really is to move past that image of the fearless martyr, executed so incredibly young, just 23, and instead really unpack the revolutionary thinker underneath it all. What were the intellectual, the political ideas driving that, well, incredibly short but intense life?
Yeah, that time frame. Born September 28, 1907, and then executed March 23, 1931. It just speaks volumes about the urgency, doesn't it? And he immediately became this potent symbol of courage, of sacrifice. Still is, really.
And what's truly fascinating when you dig into the sources is how much he actually wrote. How clearly he defined his ideology, even, while facing death. This wasn't just some spontaneous act of resistance. His legacy is deeply, deeply rooted in critical thought and political philosophy. Okay, so let's maybe unpack the timeline first.
Sounds good. Let's start at the beginning. His origins. He was born in Punjab, which is now in Pakistan, into a Sikh family. Yeah. And they already had this history of anti-British revolutionary activity. His own father, Kishan Singh, was a committed freedom fighter. So it was kind of in his blood, you could say. Right.
That family background is key. And then that personal influence gets, supercharged by these massive historical events happening around him, like the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919. That absolutely shaped his beliefs. Witnessing that kind of indiscriminate violence, it just cemented his desire to fight British oppression.
You can see how that would galvanize someone.
Yeah.
And he moved pretty quickly from just being influenced to actively organizing. After attending Dana and Anglo-Vedic High School and then National College in Lahore, he got involved with the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, the HSRA, and he also founded the Naujawan Farat Sabha. That was 1925.
Yeah, and the Naujawan Farat Sabha, that's really critical. It wasn't just another nationalist group. It's specifically aimed at non-sectarian mass organization, mobilizing peasants, mobilizing workers based on class struggle. It set this very distinct anti-caste socialist tone quite early on, really distinguished it from some of the other groups at the time.
Okay, so that organizational path, that leads us to the actions that really put him on the map, brought him global attention. Yeah. First, there was the Saunders incident in 1928. He was trying to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai, a really respected leader. Rai had died after a brutal police baton charge during a protest, but they ended up mistakenly killing a different police officer, J.P. Saunders.
Right. A case of mistaken identity in that moment of action. And then the second Mabur incident, the Central Legislative Assembly bombing in 1929. He did this with B.K. Dutt. They threw a bomb inside the Assembly Hall. And the purpose was very specific, protesting these incredibly repressive colonial laws like the Defense of India Act. This is where the political messaging becomes crystal clear.
Absolutely. And crucially, the sources emphasize they were so meticulous about not causing casualties.
Yeah.
They threw the bomb, it made a loud noise, created smoke, but didn't harm anyone. And then they just stayed there, waiting to be arrested. Because the act itself was symbolic. They weren't trying to escape. Right. They wanted the arrest. They wanted the trial.
Exactly. They intentionally planned to use the courtroom, which became the Lahore Conspiracy Case, as a platform, political theater, essentially.
True.
Yeah. The goal, as Bhagat Singh famously put it, was to make the deaf hear. Because in his words, if the deaf are to hear, the sound has to be very loud.
Yeah.
So facing the gallows, he used that entire trial, running from about June to October 1930, to just broadcast his views, his manifesto on independence, on socialism. And he absolutely refused to ask for mercy. Steadfast.
It really is kind of staggering. To think he defined this whole cohesive ideology, sparked a massive movement all before he turned 24. Which brings us nicely, I think, away from just the actions and more towards the ideas behind them. That bombing in the assembly.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a random act of defiance, was it? It was like the physical expression of his intellectual program he'd been building.
That's exactly it. And this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. You look at his influences, heavily influenced by Karl Marx, by Vladimir Lenin, even anarchist literature. And he insisted very forcefully that just kicking the British out wasn't the end goal. It wasn't enough. Political freedom for him had to be linked, absolutely twinned, with economic liberation. He saw socialism, the overthrow of the capitalist system, imperialism. That was the only real path to genuine independence.
And he was very specific about defining revolution, wasn't he? He wanted to move it away from just, chaos and violence. Yeah. He actually said, one should not interpret the word revolution in its literal sense. Revolution did not necessarily involve sanguinary strife. It was not a cult of bomb and pistol.
Which is fascinating, right? Given that he's most famous for using a bomb, it's this central paradox, but he clears up that tension himself. He saw the bomb, the pistol, as maybe tools to get attention, to make noise. But the real weapon, that was thought. Ideas.
The sword of revolution is sharpened on the whetting stone of ideas. That's his quote. Powerful imagery. And that's why he championed that slogan, popularized it. Inquilab Zindabad.
Long live the revolution, exactly. And this focus on sharpening the mind, on ideas, it leads directly to his core firm atheism. For Singh, you see, the revolution meant tackling what he saw as twin pillars of oppression. One was the capitalist colonial structure, obviously, but the other was religious dogma, superstition, things he felt kept the masses, well, docile and divided.
Yeah, his essay, Why I Am an Atheist, it's really remarkable. It gives you incredible insight into this philosophy. He really viewed religion as a kind of impediment, didn't he? Distracting people from the real fight for economic and political power.
He did. And he laid out this kind of blueprint for how a progressive society, or even just a progressive individual, needs to think. He wrote, "Merciless criticism and independent thinking are the two necessary traits of revolutionary thinking." He was urging people constantly challenge everything, challenge inherited wisdom, challenge authority.
He pushed it even further, too. Something like, any man who stands for progress has to criticize, disbelieve, and challenge every item of the old faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that this dedication to critical thought, it was the absolute foundation for his whole socialist vision.
Definitely. And building on that, he put this really specific, intense focus on the youth, on students in India. He genuinely believed the future rested entirely with them. He famously called them the salt of the earth.
Right. And he was very much in favor of students getting involved in politics, which was controversial. You know, he challenged that idea that young people should just stick to their books. He basically argued that if education doesn't equip you to understand your country's problems and do something about them, then what's the point? That education is kind of useless.
Yeah, a very pragmatic view of education's purpose. And his vision, it wasn't just limited to India either. He called on young people to think bigger, to fight on an international level. He kept emphasizing that the ultimate goal was ending exploitation everywhere, human liberation worldwide. He urged them to avoid getting bogged down by divisions like caste or color or creed. He even floated the idea of a world federation.
That forward-thinking clarity, it's probably why his critique still resonates so much today, isn't it? His push for broad mass movements instead of just individual heroic acts, and his very strong dismissal of using religion for political manipulation. It all points toward his ultimate goal, an egalitarian, pluralist India.
Absolutely. And to really grasp the power of his ideology, I think it helps to place him in context, alongside the other major figures of the independence movement. Maybe we could briefly contrast Singh with Mahatma Gandhi, not to say one was right or wrong, but just to illustrate the sheer diversity, the complexity of the freedom movement itself.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to frame it. The sources definitely show a stark contrast in methods. Gandhi, of course, centered everything on nonviolence, satyagraha, civil disobedience, mass mobilization, aiming to chip away at the moral authority, the economic grip of the British.
Whereas Singh, while he did eventually advocate for critical thinking and these organized mass movements, he also employed direct, sometimes militant, revolutionary action against colonial symbols, like the bombing. But maybe the core difference lies in their vision for the future after independence. Gandhi tended to emphasize rural self-sufficiency, maybe more traditional values. Singh demanded a complete socialist republic, focused on economic equality, social justice, structural change.
And thinking about that specific time period he lived in, 1907 to 1931, it feels like ancient history sometimes. But it was a period of such intense global change. It helps to kind of ground it, remind ourselves how fast things were moving.
Yeah, it's easy to isolate figures like Singh, put them in this sort of historical box, but the world he was operating in, it was modernizing incredibly fast. Ideologies were spreading like wildfire thanks to new communication. I saw a fascinating point in the source material just for perspective. It mentioned that Cleopatra actually lived closer in time to the invention of the iPhone than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids.
Wow. Okay, that does put things in perspective, that sense of historical distance or lack thereof. Yeah. So Singh wasn't fighting in some remote past. He was grappling with modern issues in an interconnected world. Empires were crumbling, new socialist ideas were taking root everywhere. He was right in the thick of those global currents.
Exactly. And the fact that India's freedom struggle contained both strands, he fused them together. And if we really take his core argument seriously, that the revolution is sharpened on the wedding stone of ideas. It kind of leaves us and you listening with a powerful question to think about. He believed, and I'm quoting him here, that the sanctity of law can be maintained only so long as it is the expression of the will of the people. So the question is, what inherent obligation does that belief place on us, on you, as a critical thinker today? What obligation do you have to actively, maybe even fearlessly, challenge the established systems around you, political, economic, social, when you perceive they are failing that fundamental test, when they no longer truly express the will or serve the justice of the people?